Welcome to Take5, a podcast produced by Go Short, in which we take a break from the film festival to talk about the art of making short films, film festivals, and more. Making sure we step back and reflect by sharing industry insights, experiences, and helping today and future makers on their filmmaking. So on today's episode is Ren Scateni joining us on our little intermission. So grab a seat, take a break, and let's explore the art of filmmaking.
People, I guess, naturally might think, judging films means deciding if a film is good or bad, but it's not really that. Also because what does it mean to be good for a film? What does it mean to be bad? Personally, I'd rather think of short film as like a form of art in itself. You can also experiment a bit more with something that is hybrid or liminal and that's not really responding to some, predetermined boxes. Maybe instead of saying, this film is bad, maybe saying, actually, I'm not sure this film worked for me. I've been very, receptive to those things and I've been thinking about this a lot.
Ren Scateni is a writer and a film curator. Their practice focuses on experimental films and artist-moving images that explores the boundaries of political, disruptive, and liminal identities. He was head of the program at the Encounters Festival for Go Short, and Ren will act as a juror for the European competition. So how did you stumble upon this role as a jury inside Go Short?
So, usually it's like invitation. You are invited by the festival to be on a jury. And maybe before replying to this question, I can give you a little bit more context about what it means, how you actually approach juries. Because as you were saying before, I was working at a festival before, being head of program encounters in the UK. What you usually do, I guess, you want to ensure that there is a bit of diversity in terms of the professional backgrounds of people on the juries. Then there might be some guidelines in your festivals. Maybe you know that you want to have some filmmakers who won some awards at your festival in the previous edition or in past editions. I don't know really. But then, you might want to have some other professional individuals from other festivals. And that's my case, for example, because as working for a festival, I was also attending a lot of other stuff in Europe, in European countries.
Yeah.
And then is where I met Mathieu and Michel, working for Go Short. And in the end, you develop connections, you develop a network, and then you're just invited to be on juries. And that's some sort of an exchange of sorts. Or sometimes you're invited back. And then, it creates just another way of creating connections when it comes to the festival industry.
Yeah.
Really.
So how do you enjoy it so far here at Go Short?
No, it's been great, really. I mean, it's quite, we have a very, tight schedule on some days, but, it's very well thought out. So it's okay, it's working.
It's kind of what you signed up for.
It's never a given. Sometimes it depends,
Yeah.
Different teams, different festivals. You never know what's gonna happen to you.
Do you like the fact that you never really know what's gonna happen to you?
In festivals?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, there's a little unpredictability when you go around and you don't really know what to expect from certain places and certain organizations. So I guess it's interesting really to see differences, and also it reflects maybe differences in European countries as well. So different approaches to how work and curate festivals or just putting things together. I guess you can see a lot of the usual differences in terms of, I don't know. I'm not stereotyping, of course, but there's a little of that as well in this whole conversation, really.
Yeah.
But I've been enjoying it a lot so far, so it's
great.
been great.
Well, that's good to hear that we do a thing good.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know what a juror actually does because we don't see you. You are in a
You're lurking in the dark.
You're in some other room without any other guests. So what does a jury or you what do you do as a juror for this festival?
So what happens is usually we watch a lot of films. So depending on what kind of competitions you are judging for, you have to watch all the programs in that competition. And what happens usually is that you need to watch all the programs before a certain day, because you've got a deadline, like an internal deadline. Everything must be decided usually the day before your award ceremony. So you've got like the deliberation dinner or lunch or whatever else, the deliberation event the day before, usually, when you convene with the other jurors and you just sit down, discuss the films a bit more, and then you decide on the winners that you have to decide for. And you also write a little statement for the jury and the award ceremony.
The reason why they
basically the reason why you decided to give that award to that specific film. So this is what we do as jurors. We sometimes we could attend, like in this case here at Go Short, we attend a mix of public and private screenings. So sometimes we are sitting together with like public members, and then most of the time maybe we are just alone in a very big screening room, which is super cool, honestly.
What do you like more? It's a little bit of a this or that.
Well, I guess I like the idea of like being alone in a screening room and, being there and enjoying the screening for myself. Then we can also pause in between programs, and then, if you need to go to the toilet or just make a phone call, whatever. But there's an additional, I guess, layer when it comes to being a public screening, because you can also, see the reaction of people.
Yeah.
But personally, there's something I'm maybe not very comfortable with when it comes to have a mix of these two settings, and it's the fact that when you are in a public screening, you can hear the Q&As as well.
Yeah.
And there are different festivals doing different things. Like at Encounters, we were doing the Q&As at the very end, so the jury could have left the screening room if they wanted, or if they didn't want to listen to the Q&As. Whereas here, the Q&A is like at the end of a film, so potentially you could just go outside, but no one is doing that. So you need to sit there and listen to a filmmaker like explaining stuff about their film, which is of course great. But then when you're not given the opportunity to do that for all the films you're judging, then maybe, I don't know, this is a personal opinion.
Maybe it will be more not maybe objective, but more subjective.
Yeah, definitely. But then you don't really have that opportunity with all the films and all the filmmakers. So it might give you, I don't know, different cues or ways of reading. I guess it just gives an opportunity to the filmmaker to explain stuff, and then it could impact, or not really change, but could definitely impact your decision making or steer the conversation between the jurors right after the screening, depending on what it's being said or asked.
Do you think you are impacted by that?
Yeah, I need to say yes, because just yesterday we were actually discussing a film, and then the filmmaker was in the room, and then the conversation was actually really important and useful. And I think it actually steered our conversation as jurors. And I mean, maybe in the end we wouldn't have changed anything, but you cannot know for sure.
Right, I get that, yes. So can you tell us maybe more about the judging process? So what is the process of viewing and judging the submitted films?
Well, I mean, they've been submitted to the festival, not to us specifically, but we're still watching like some films that have been submitted to the festival at the very beginning of the journey. So, I guess I can tell you how we are working as a jury this time around, because sometimes you just sit down at the very beginning of your jury journey and decide, okay, how do we want to approach this? What do we want to do?
So you can decide that yourself?
Yeah, sure. Usually you're not given any kind of guidelines by the festival. The only thing that you are told are, these are the awards you should be giving, you should select like a film for, and then you are super free to do basically whatever you want. You will have a jury coordinator, but that person is there mostly for, reminding us where we have to be, or just giving us schedules and like nudging us if we're maybe like we need to go somewhere else.
Like a bit of an assistant.
Yeah, kind of, PA for the jury.
Personal assistant.
Yeah, exactly. So in our case, what we did was kind of deciding that we wanted to discuss all the films right after we were watching them. So we basically sit in a screening room, we watch the film, and then we carry over with lunch. And then during lunch, we start discussing the films we just watched already, because they're like fresher in our minds in a way. And it's also a way to, I guess, I don't know, making some sort of like short listing along the way as well. So we usually like put a little dot or like a cross.
The bullet points? You mean,
Not
or-
really. I mean, we just discuss the film in terms of, oh, what did you think about this one?
Yeah.
And then like each one of them gives a little response, like a personal response, and then we might, depending on what kind of film that is or what kind of things have been said, then we can just, dive a tiny bit deeper into, I don't know, some specific aspect of the films. And then if the general consensus that we gain is, okay, we're actually quite convinced about this one, that we might put a little dot or little cross on the
right,
film, on the catalog. And then it's for us to remember, oh, actually, this film might be like, not eligible, all of them are eligible, but for us could be an option for the prize. And then it's going to help us, I guess, steering the conversation tomorrow night, on the deliberation night, where we are, deliberating pretty much and going through everything again.
Every juror has their own way of judging, of course. Everyone likes different things and everyone does everything different. So what are some key elements you pay attention to while watching those movies?
Well, that's interesting, really, because it's super true. And something that it's very funny when you are in a jury is that you don't really know who the other people are, because sometimes you meet them for the very first time. And then it's also a very vulnerable place to be in a jury, because you have, or at least maybe I should say that judging films or like commenting films or responding to them is something very personal to me, and could be like something very vulnerable as well, depending on what kind of content you are watching and in what way you are responding to that, because it could be like because of your identity or your lived experience. So there should be like some sort of safe space to be able to actually respond to the film in a truthful way, or like something that
more
feels
objective than more subjective.
Well, I don't really mind if it's objective or subjective, because I mean these are very nuanced terms, and it's really difficult to agree on what subjective means, or especially like with objectivity, it's really tough. And I guess like with jurors, with jury members, there's an element of like subjectivity that we really need to put into the conversation and to drag into the conversation. But when it comes to me, I mean, I guess similar to what my interests are when I write or like when I curate film, I think like as a baseline, I always try to find the political in the films, or to see if there's some sort of like political message or something like that adds something more to the film. Which doesn't mean that I don't appreciate things which are maybe just, let's say formal experiments without any additional layer of meaning. But I guess like more naturally I'm like, drawn towards something that has a bit more bite or depth when it comes to societal problems, issues, something more contemporary maybe, so stuff along those lines. So try to keep that into consideration and bring it to the table when we discuss with the others.
What are some challenges you face as a juror while judging those movies?
Well, I think it's like similar to what I've just said, really, is that, that being in a very vulnerable space, at least for me, and sometimes, I mean, I had not great experiences. I mean, just one comes to mind where I didn't really feel I was in a space where I could actually say everything that I wanted to say and being like straightforward as I usually are. Because it's not that I felt judged, but I felt that it wasn't really welcomed. It wasn't the way I was approaching films, and the way I was expressing my own opinions wasn't super welcomed by a specific other member of the jury. So I wasn't, I mean, it could have been improved, the overall experience. So I guess that's a challenge, really. I mean, because of course we are human beings and we naturally have, like connections, and those connections could be like a bit more positive or maybe negative with other people. So you are, just consider this, you're stuck with these other 4 people in our case, because it's 5 of us, and then you have to build some sort of like trust and kind of a relationship in the end, and then you are just exchanging ideas on films, and then it can get personal, of course, because you can, depending, for me usually it goes personal, so that's maybe my own issue. But that's the most challenging thing of the entire process. And then also, I guess, overall is the idea of like, I don't know, sometimes I really question the very own idea of having juries at festivals. So I've been vocal about that during like in some other panel discussions at other festivals, but I'm also like, challenging the idea of competitions, prizes, jurors, juries, which is funny because I'm a juror right now. So, but yeah, I have that as well. So, it's a lot of, of kind of handling all of these and kind of navigating all these different aspects of maybe like personally, I'm not so comfortable with the idea of having competitions at festivals and like being there to judge, but also at the same time, this is how it works. So, you can, it's hard, and usually it's a very slow process if you want to change things. But then, it's a very complex conversation, really.
And in the end, you have to come to an agreement with the other judges.
Yeah, definitely. That's also that. And then there's also the question of, we sometimes people, but I guess maybe we're overcoming that a bit, but people, I guess, naturally might think about, judging films means deciding if a film is good or bad, but it's not really that. Also because what does it mean to be good for a film? What does it mean to be bad? I guess we should like reframe that conversation or that way of, responding and approaching films and actually saying, what does this film do for me? Like, let's put myself in front of the film, not really as someone who judges, but someone who is experiencing that film and is responding personally to that film. So also like all these, this vocabulary of, good, bad, submissions. It's really layered. It's really colonialist in a way, imperialist. So you might also reframe that in a way and responding to stuff in a different way. Maybe instead of saying, this film is bad, maybe saying, actually, I'm not sure this film worked for me. All of this stuff, of course, I'm like, kind of throwing and being inspired from other people who said these things like before me and very even better ways than I do. But then, yes, I've been very, like receptive to those things, and I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of like the industry and how to structure
about
things.
Judging.
Yeah.
So you also write.
Yeah.
You're also very invested in this industry, like working at another festival before. How important do you consider the role of short films in the film industry and cultural sector? Personally,
I do think that I do love short films, mostly because they're like such an agile form in a way. And then, since it's short, then you can experiment a lot more with content, genre, and so it gives, you have a lot more possibility of like, just creating something. And I think like similar to what I was saying before, you can also like experiment a bit more with something that is hybrid or liminal and that is not really responding to some, predetermined boxes. But also, like, if I think about short film from a more, a talent development perspective, for some filmmakers specifically, it's also like a stepping stone, a fundamental stepping stone in their careers, because they usually start with, like working on a short film and then creating some sort of like little portfolio for them of short films. And then with that, if they want, they can just, leap into feature filmmaking. So although, again, personally, I'd rather think of short film as like a form of art in itself, something that you pursue not because it's like, as I just said, a stepping stone, but because it's a form that you enjoy. It's a format, a length that you really like to, dive in. And I guess here it depends on what kind of filmmakers you are. If you're like an artist filmmaker, maybe you're using the short form in a different way. But it's an incredible format. Yeah, it depends on the maker. But there are so many like creative possibilities. So it's really so inspiring and honestly like, exciting.
And after watching a lot of movies, like you're actually in the middle of it right now, are there any specific trends or developments you notice in this world actually of short films?
Well, yeah.
More like things people use, maybe directing or maybe some specific elements that are much used.
I think what I'm really noticing is something that I've just been saying a lot really, but it's this, kind of stripping down the boundaries or like the limitations of like some categories and like formats. And then you might have, a lot of filmmakers really experimenting with hybrid approaches, like for example, mixing animation in a live action or like, using documentary and just, putting there some other stuff. And which also makes it a little bit more difficult for festivals if they have like, those little categories in which they need to put the films in for award purposes.
Yeah.
So this is something that I really enjoy because it feels like it disrupts, the order of things. It feels like filmmakers are actually trying to disrupt the order of things by themselves. So I'm really appreciative of that. But yeah, I guess there's also like a lot of lately of films using found footage and archival material, which is something that again is very dear to me in a way, especially when you are, using something that was done in a very specific way, maybe like responding to some mainstream narrative or like dominant storytelling and stuff. And then you're now reusing that to unearth some hidden layers or like, using maybe a bit more contemporary sensibilities, or just because your identity actually calls for, let's use this material to tell my own story because my own story was like hidden until recent times. So I think there's something that's like, going on in short film right now.
Do you have any advice for filmmakers considering submitting their short films in the industry?
I guess in general for filmmakers, it would be like really important to have an understanding of, the focus that the different festivals have, because there may be some festivals focusing on some type of filmmaking specifically, and then just don't send your film. If you are maybe like working on experimental filmmaking, for example, there are some festivals which they don't really program like experimental stuff because maybe it's just too much for their audiences. So since, submitting is something that also involves money because you have to pay, it depends on your, agreements with if you have a distributor. But anyway, it involves money. So I guess like doing a little research, which is, yes, labor intensive and it's unpaid and it's terrible, of course. But then, just having an understanding of what kind of, festivals may be a best or a better fit for your own film. And if filmmakers have the mean, also like going to festivals, if they live like in a country, maybe trying to attend a festival in their country, because like pretty much all the different festivals in the short film industry, they do some industry events called like one-to-ones or like meet the festivals. And in that case, what happens is that you have a bunch of programmers from different festivals in Europe sitting in the same room, and then you can, sit in front, like a sort of a blind date in a way. You just sit there, you've got like 5 to 10 minutes depending on the format, and then you can, chat with the programmer and understand a bit more about the festival, and also maybe getting the contact of the programmer in that case if you're bold enough to ask.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for answering my questions. Those were all my questions.
Thank you for inviting me and for asking the questions, really.
Yes, of course. Thank you for watching and listening to this episode. Please, if you like it, watch another one or listen to another one, and see you next time.